welcome to the Clifton Worley Show. This week we have Jonathan Diaz, and he's on another podcast, The Effects Loop. I've known Jonathan for a couple years now, and we've been to NAMM twice, running each other there. And
yeah, the first year was the year that I had Cardboard Blake.
Yes,
and we got to do that fun interview.
That was a lot of fun. And for our listeners who may not know who Cardboard Blake is, Blake Weiland couldn't come that year, and you decided to do like a life-size cardboard cutout of Blake, carry around with you, and he had there was a fundraiser attached to it, wasn't there?
Yeah. So I'm if you ever get a chance to listen to the podcast I'm on, you'll kind of find out that my thought process is pretty out there. Not like creepy, weird, but like it's just like I always like think of the outside the box. Like people are like, what is that guy doing? So I was like, man, it'd be funny if I had a cutout of cardboard or of Blake from the Tone Mob, and I was like, dude, can we do like a fundraiser? And like, if I raise the funds, would you be okay with it? He's like, yeah, go for it. I said, well, what if we do, if we do a charity, like anything above what it costs to get Blake the cardboard cutout made, we'll give to charity. So we got to do a cool charity. Blake picked it. It was a guy who was on the show. It's been so long I've kind of forgotten, but it was really cool. It actually was the start of quite a bit for me, because I got to meet a lot of industry people. And it's funny because usually you oh, well, I met this person through Clifton, or I met this person through, so-and-so. I got to meet people through Blake, and Blake wasn't even there. And Blake and I haven't actually met in person before. So it was kind of cool. And that kind of snowballed into me being on the Fex Loop and getting to talk to a lot of cool industry people. So,
yeah. Well, just to fill everybody in, we were at NAMM last year, and that's when you had Cardboard Blake, and then this year we actually, me and the rest of you, Effects Loops crew, and
Daniel Shields and his brother.
Yeah. I'm trying not to leave anybody else, but I think that was it.
Yeah, that was it. It seemed like a lot more because there's always people there.
Yeah. We had this I thought it was a pretty awesome house over in East Nashville that we rented out for a couple days, and
it was called the Podcast House. That's like literally, I mean, there's only 2 podcasts in there, but it was like in our circle of podcast people, we're the only 2 that got to go, the only 2 podcasts, and that was pretty awesome. That was a lot of fun. That was every year I take that as one of my vacations because I know I'm just gonna have a blast.
Yeah, I think I heard somebody, maybe it was Anthony Chang, say it's kind of like summer camp for musicians.
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. It's summer camp, and it's like the camp where you keep going back and everyone knows everybody, and you get the new people. That's a lot of fun too. Like Nathaniel Bernicker was like in our group, kind of like the new guy, and it was so funny because he was like a little puppy that got so excited when he saw everything. And by like the 3rd day, we're just over it. And he was still just so excited because it was his first year. I think it was my like 3rd or 4th year. So I was just kind of like chilling, having a good time. But yeah, it's really cool. I think everyone should go at least one time in their life if you're a musician.
Yeah, it's pretty overwhelming actually. Of course, I don't want to be like a NAMM recap show or anything, but it's a pretty big show, and you're running into all kind of people, and it can get tiring pretty quick because like you're so excited and so pumped and talking to people, and I think the last night I crashed on the couch and just like collapsed while everybody else was up having a good time.
I think the last night was when we did our cookout, our grill.
Oh yeah, I left before that. Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
that's right.
yeah.
Oh man. So we and there was a lot of we all like had these like exciting things we want to do, Like everyone brought their amps and their rigs, and we were all gonna have a good time. And we did that one night, and like the rest of it, we're just like, no more noise. We're gonna be, we're all gonna be quiet because you just get so exhausted. And a lot of people, a lot of musicians are considered introverted too. So I'm a huge introvert, and it's like after that, man, I just don't want to be around people.
Yeah. Well, I would never be able to tell that you were introvert. I think we
I
kind of
hide
all
it pretty
become
well.
extroverts at now.
Yeah, I'm like, if I'm around people that I know, like I'm totally out there having a good time. But yeah, it's like I kind of like go crazy and then I'm dead.
Yeah. Well, so and I'd like to kind of talk about our that rig situation. Everybody brought their gear and everything, maybe in a little bit, but let's go back. And I want to. I don't think that I've ever really talked with you about how you got your start playing music, or
Oh
kind
yeah.
of what your journey was like. So if you would just for the next few minutes, kind of catch me up to speed on that.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Florida, a little bit north of Tampa, west of Orlando. And my stepdad who raised me, he was a drummer. He came from a musical family. My uncle Mark, his brother, actually drummed for Loretta Lynn.
Cool.
Um, and so I was raised around music. My brother, he's a multi instrumentalist, or I don't know how do you say that word? Multi instrumentalist, and he started off on drums, and I saw how much he had to carry around, so I was like, I'm gonna do less than that. I was like, guitar. I'm not carrying. And there's my dogs. So, and I own dogs, but yeah, he I was raised listening to old school jazz, and a lot of Motown. Gene Krupa is one of my favorite drummers of all times because of just how I was raised. But I picked up guitar probably when I was about 10. I went to some lessons and I put it down. I really just, it was more than I wanted to do at the time. And, but I still love music and everything. And I went and I started band. I started on trumpet, moved to tuba, and then sometime in high school, I think I was like 15, I realized that girls don't dig the tuba and you can't play Wonderwall on the tuba. So I was like, okay, I've got to get a guitar again. And so I think for my 16th, right before my 16th birthday, my stepfather was sick. And before he passed away the day after my birthday. Before he passed away, he bought me an Epiphone Special 2. Um, so that it was really cool. That was like my first guitar, and I just started playing, and I didn't stop. Um, I started playing in church too, and that's a big thing. That's where I play now. And one of the first churches I played at was an Assemblies of God church, so that had a little bit of a gospel feel to it, especially in the in the 90s, early
Uh-huh.
2000s.
Uh-huh.
And then I went and my brother got a gig at a predominantly black church and brought me with him. By predominantly black, I mean me and him were the only white people there. And we met in a elementary school cafeteria, and that was like the turning point. That's when I knew what type of guitar player I want to be, because the musical director there, he turned to me one day and he's like, "Don't be afraid to play." He said, "If you hit a wrong note, just keep bending until you get there." And I was like, man, like that was the like cornerstone of how I play. I play a lot of gospel guitar, a lot of blues. Some of my like Angus Young, AC/DC live at Donington was the reason why I wanted to play. Like that was the reason why I wanted the guitar in the first place too. Was like I saw that and I was like, man, I don't want to wear that outfit, but I want to play like that. So. I mean, I've gotten really good because I always wanted to be a session musician. That was like my goal. And one thing that I would listen to a lot of session musicians is like, you can't be one style. You got to play everything.
Yeah, yeah.
So I mean, I tend to play more towards gospel and blues, but I've really been proud of, I can kind of sit in anywhere and fit in. That's like, I mean, except for like some of these, like if it's, drop A chugging, that one's not going to happen. But
Uh-huh.
for the most part, I can play any style, and it's one thing that I've really worked on.
Yeah, well, that's one thing. Like I noticed we were sitting around the Nam house, and you were like a library when it came to cover songs and even
Hmm.
like picking up and singing those lyrics by memory and performing those songs and all the lead licks. Where did you get like what pushed you into that where you
Uh,
could have that extensive library?
so the musical director that taught me that about bending the note, he used to play at Bennigan's on Friday nights, and my brother and I mean, we're what, I mean, like 17, and my brother is 3 years younger than me, so he was like 14, and we went and we were playing Bennigan's, and that's one thing you have to be able to do too, is if you're playing a live act like that, is know different genres. I mean, especially at like, I mean, if you're playing like in a rock bar, then you've got that going for you. You can do that thing and just stick with that style. But when you're playing out and you're playing for hours, you've got to know different styles, and especially whenever people do a lot of requests. So that's like the you said I've got an extensive library of riffs and everything. A lot of that comes from us taking requests and really trying to fake it too. If we don't know the song, we'll play something close, or it'll sound like we know what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that was kind of fun because I mean we're literally like, hey, when you do a Tom Petty song, you spout off a Tom Petty song or X Y Z, and so it's like when it came to that, it's like you could really tell you'd spent some time there
Oh yeah, I
playing
dropped
that.
out of high school. I dropped out of high school. That's how I learned all that stuff. Was, was skipping school, going to Sam Ash or Guitar Center, and just messing around. And I remember I had this book that was as thick as a dictionary, and it was every AC/DC song. And man, I studied that. And I'd get books, the tab books that you see at Guitar Center, and when I was first starting playing, and it would be like classic rock riffs, and it would like 25 of the top ones, and I'd go through and I'd learn them, and somehow I remembered most of them. That's like one of my favorite ones that I learned in a book that I can remember extensively was "Crazy on You" by Heart.
Yeah,
That's an amazing song for guitar, and it's just cool little different styles going on in the song. So I mean, it's just years and years of playing those types of gigs and stuff. And like my brother, he's a gigging musician down in Orlando, Florida. He did the theme song for our podcast, or we got to use his song off of his album. Uh, and like I went down there and played a week with him, and he'd be like, he's like, all right, here's the songs we're doing. Most likely he'd turn around, kick us in another song. So, and coming in a Pentecostal church, we do that a lot too. I mean, we're a charismatic church, and
hmm
the set list is kind of a guide. It's not a guarantee. We'll go into another random song, and you've got to try to remember that line or those parts out of nowhere. So I guess it's just the style that I play has built. That's the way I do things.
yeah. Well, let me ask you about your gear a little bit. You
Yeah.
brought several things with you. You had, I think, like your SG. Um, you had
Uh,
your Firebird.
yeah, and my telly didn't make it. That
Okay.
was That was so I play an SG, a Firebird, and a Telly. Those are my three electrics. And I'm not a big acoustic player. I mean, I'll do acoustic whenever I'm sitting around the house just playing and singing. But I own a few Alvarez guitars, which are highly underrated acoustic guitars. And I have a Gretsch acoustic as well. And the electrics cover so many different grounds. And like you said, I play all these different riffs and stuff, so I like having a different sound going on, and I can pull whatever sound out of those guitars.
What's your number one?
Uh, um, that's tough. Probably my SG. That's my reliable one. Um, it honestly has the most range and tone. SGs can be very trebly. They can sound twangy, and they
hmm
also get really dark too. So, but my Telecaster has been with me the longest out of those three. and that thing holds a special place in my heart. That was my first American-made guitar, and I've always had a thing for Telecasters. Prince is a big influence on me, and his Telecaster
Mm-hmm.
is just something, man. I'd do anything for one of those.
Yeah, I love that color telly with that kind of pick guard.
Yeah, so my Telly's a butterscotch blonde with the leopard print pickguard. Um, Prince's guitar was a Honer, the original one, and he had a luthier build him replicas, but they all said Honer. And so it was kind of a darker um, butterscotch than mine, but it still had the leopard print, and that was kind of his thing on that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's a really rad looking guitar. I've seen a few of those, like I think is it Harley Benton?
Yeah, Harley Benton makes a copy of it
Yeah.
that looks pretty sweet. Emily Harris in the 60 Cycle Hum group and a few other groups, she's got one. And yeah, I've been jonesing for one.
Yeah, those. Well, I remember you doing a live stream of the Firebird when you got it. I guess that was around Christmas. I remember watching it because I was I was going through my Facebook. I was out decorating, putting up Christmas lights for Christmas, and I remember you going live. I don't know, this is the weirdest memory. I remember being outside, and like thumbing through and seeing that, and that looks like a really fun guitar, and I love that. Like, was it Pelham Blue?
Yeah, Pelham Blue. So I'm a big, like, people influence me and I stick with it. Dave Grohl's also been a big influence on me, like when it comes to playing rock styles. And Pelham Blue's his color. He's got the DS, was it 335G or 339G, which is like the Trini Lopez copy. And I want one of those, but those they don't make those anymore, and they're like $5 to $6 grand on the used market. Leon from Pelican Noise Works, who was on your show, he has a black one.
Oh wow, yeah. Okay.
And I'd say this is going to air near my birthday, so Leon, if you listen, you can just send that to me.
I keep hoping somebody's gonna send me a guitar on my birthday, and it never happens.
Scott, who's another host on my podcast, I keep dropping hints. I'm like, dude, he's like, I'm not buying you a Dweller for your birthday by Old Boys Noise Works, and I was like, oh man.
Yeah. Well, so you brought your Kemper along.
Yes.
And I want to. That seems to be a theme like lately with several of my guests, is they're making that transition over to Kemper or Helix or like a digital solution. And I know you came from like a tube amplifier background.
Yeah.
Kind of talk me through that.
So I can tell you, I was never a really big amp guy. You've got the people who argue should you have an expensive amp and a cheap guitar, expensive guitar, cheap amp, stuff like that. And I was always kind of in the middle. My first amp was a Blue Crate amp, the 2x12. It was 100 watts, and I was like, oh yeah, and it had the like distortion channel and the crunch channel and a reverb, and it was a cool amp. Blake from Tone Mob still has one, and then I got rid of that, and I had that for probably almost 5 years, and that's all I played through. And then I got a Jet City JCA 20H, and that's a tube head designed by Saldano. I played that for a while, and then I moved to a Fender Excelsior, and that was my main amp for quite a few years, was that Fender Excelsior. And so I've still got that. I haven't gotten rid of that. And one day I was sitting around and I was looking at my pedal board, and I had the Strymon Trinity. I had the King of Tone. I had probably almost $4,000 into my pedal board from like just collectively buying, selling, and trading. And I was like, man, I need a good amp. And I started looking at tube amps, and I was like, you know what about the Kemper? And I literally like did a fire sale. I sold half of my pedal board, got 2 grand within like 48 hours, and I bought a Kemper. And the main thing I was looking for Kemper is, so I play at church a lot, and go running direct is a benefit at church. You got the silent stage thing that everyone's going for, and I was like, if I'm going to run direct, I want it to be legit, and I want to have a nice amp that's doing it. And I went with a Kemper, and I haven't looked back. I haven't wanted another amp or anything. So
Yeah. Well, this also it handles some of the effects for you too, right?
yeah. So at one point, I was running a MIDI controller, and I could change effects, stuff like that, and change performances. A performance is a amp cabinet and everything, and effects set up for like a certain part of a song, and or you can like just pull it up. It changes your amp and everything, and it's called a performance. It's just a save setting, and I was doing that, and I was also running pedals, and it's really cool because the Kemper has an effects loop, so you can run your reverbs, delays in the back. It's got so much going on to it, and it was just a really good thing. And, when I practice, I can just plug in the Kemper, turn on whatever effects I want, and no one's bothered. I'm listening through headphones, and what you listen through the headphones is usually what comes through your mains at church or at whatever gig you're playing. So, I mean, you got these gigs where people really could be running direct, and it's such an easy thing to do with sound check, and you're not fighting for stage volume. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's been awfully tempting for me to go that route, but I think, and this is the thing I keep telling everybody, that I think I'm a junkie for the pushing the air thing in the room.
oh yeah, no, I miss that sometimes. I'll plug my Kemper into my 2x12 and get that air moving when I really need it. But there's a lot of people who are like, they want to fight about Kemper or tube amps, and it's like, man, they've both got their own thing going for them.
Hmm.
I mean, I think I love plugging in a tube amp every once in a while, just running straight in and using it like a built-in reverb or tremolo, and just making some noise.
Yeah, totally. That's kind of the spectrum, the end of the spectrum I kind of live in. And I only use pedals when I go out to play, typically, um, when I need it.
Hmm. I'm a pedal junkie, so I'm always messing with pedals. That's like, if you happen to see in our group for the effects loop, I go live a little bit here and there, and I'm plugging in pedals and just having fun with them.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've noticed, kind of following you on Facebook for a while, is like your love for pedals, and you like trying out a lot of things. What are some of your your highlights, your favorites?
Um, right now I've been on a big phaser binge.
Really?
So I own 3 Boss phasers. I have a Boss PH1R, which is the Boss PH1 but with a tone, has a tone knob on it. I've got two Boss PH2s. One was built in Taiwan, one was built in Japan. And then I've also got a Vailton Boss PH1 clone. So I love Incubus, and you can't get their noise without a phaser. Mike Enzinger's just absolutely amazing. That's kind of my kick right now. I love overdrives too. Um, Different sounds, different feels, and fuzzes. But like, if I was to pick one effect that I had to live with, it'd definitely be delay. I love messing with delays. I've owned pretty much every delay I've been able to get my hand on.
Yeah, that I think that's like the one effect that, like, if I had to take it off a pedal board and just put it on the floor and bring with me, would be like a delay. You give me an amp with reverb, a good reverb, and maybe like a tremolo, and I would bring in a delay before I brought a drive pedal.
Yeah, delay just does something, and I have a even time factor. That's kind of what I've landed on. I've owned like 2 of them before this, but I keep coming back to them. Uh, it honestly can be so inspiring, and you can write a song based on your delay. Like, it changes the way you play and how things sound. So I think it's by far one of my favorite things. The Dan Electro Dan Echo is the best sounding delay pedal ever either. Or, I mean, or just it's phenomenal.
Hmm. Well,
That's a really cool pedal because I've modded them where you can go into self oscillation and that's a lot of fun.
yeah. One of the things I think about like delays or even like tremolo is they kind of have their own preamp character to it. So
Hmm.
like it's almost like you can, if you get one that has a sweet sound to it, you can make it like not super crazy, but like always on, and
Hmm.
it kind of it shapes your tone a little bit.
So I almost always play with delay on. I very rarely do I turn it off. It just adds a whole layer and it's kind of like a good backing to your sound. That or a thick reverb, which reverb's just kind of a delay. So,
Yeah, it's just a different decay and
mhm.
repeats. Yeah, I remember somebody telling me one time. Uh, I guess I don't have any substantial facts for this, but that the chips inside like a pedal that did reverb like are very similar to the ones that use for delay.
Yeah, so pretty much reverb is just like kind of like a slapback but with a long decay.
Hmm.
I mean that's pretty much it. Or like that's pretty much in my opinion what it is.
Yeah, I think they live in the same sphere, anyways. Uh,
Mhm.
um, well, what about do you have any particular like what's your drive like? What kind of drive sections do you lean towards?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of the Blues Breaker circuit, uh, Prince of Tone, King of Tone,
Hmm.
um, stuff like that. Right now, my main overdrive is the Dually from Westminster Effects. So
Okay.
they make an amazing drive. It's pretty much in the style of a King of Tone. It's two blues breakers together. That's a great one. I also have a controversial one that I love. That's the Gear Supply Co. Light Drive. We won't talk about the thing, but it's a phenomenal pedal that I enjoy. But the one drive pedal I don't care for is a Tube Screamer though. I've never found one that like I really clicked with. I keep buying them, but I also feel like I'm not using it right. And then, I mean, that goes into also like distortion and fuzz. I love distortion and fuzz. Um, the I've been using a Proco, not a Proco Rat, a Big Ear woodcutter, which is based on a Proco Rat. Uh, and then I also have Pelican Noiseworks, Pelotar, and Half Horse on my board right now too.
Okay. Now I love the Pelotar. It's just it's one of the coolest fuzzes to me that you can play with. And I
Yeah.
don't own one right now, but I mean I would love to in the near future. But I just think it's such a versatile pedal. Um,
Man, that thing is funky,
yeah.
like in the best way. I get really upset because like I really can't use it in church that much. You, especially like especially the church I go to. Well, we used to play a lot of like gospel music and like kind of like a Southern gospel thing. The worship pastor was raised in a Southern gospel like quartet and all that, and like you can't hear like when I think about the Lord, like it just doesn't work. So they I don't get to kick it on much, but the half horse is really cool because it's one side, but you have a lot of control. You've got the grain control, which is a gain control, and you can really get a cool like overdrive feel to it. Um, but there's a lot of cool fuzzes out there. I really want to try. Electro Harmonix just came out with the Triangle Fuzz,
Yeah.
which is their big muff, the silver triangle one. And man, I'm like, I saw some of their videos and they're like playing American Woman like the lead line, and I was like, I need that sound in my life.
Yeah, I've been watching some of those demos. Actually, I was watching one today where they were doing like the Comfortably Numb cover with it,
Oh yeah,
and it sounds pretty sweet.
yeah. It's looks really awesome, but I'm also like, I'm one of those people that like window shops way too much. I've got three kids, and I know you've got a few kids of your own, and man, Did you know that they want to eat 3 times a day? Man, they like, have you seen the like price of movie tickets at the theater? God bless America, those are insane. We've got a $2 movie in like the town over, and we wait for the good movie to go there, and we're like, all right, we're gonna send all 5 of us in for $10, and we're gonna enjoy it.
Yeah, that's usually like a $50-$60 excursion. That
Yeah.
usually it's like for me and my family, it's like once a year. That's a treat. Like we're gonna go to the movies and see. Like, of course, I have all girls, so it's usually like
Oh
the
yeah.
newest Disney movie or something like that.
Well, if you ever like need to, you can come hang out with us, and we'll go see Star Wars because I have 3 boys, and I'm like, they're they're like, I want to see blood, gore, and guts, and I'm like, that's it. Yeah, my wife's over here bored. She's like, when do I get to pick a movie? I'm like, never. Sorry, the votes are not in your favor. We control 80% of the vote.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's not a reality at my house. So, but
Yeah,
it's
you're
okay.
outnumbered.
Yeah. Um. Well, I think it was about it. I think it was almost exactly a year ago, because I think it was the last week of September. Last year, I got to stop in your neck of the woods on my way up
Yeah.
to Washington D.C. and you're right outside of Knoxville, and got to go check out where you work and everything, and so that was actually kind of fun. Now you've kind of gotten a promotion here lately.
Yeah, so I'm a training manager for Burger King.
Awesome.
So, like whenever we have a new store manager, they come with me and spend about 6 to 8 weeks with me learning how to do a decent job. So, yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, takes up a lot of my time. I do that, and we have the podcast, and then I have kids and a wife, and so
Well, I don't know how you do it because I used to work for food service as well, and I never had time for music or anything during that period of my life.
yeah, it kind of falls to the wayside. I have to like really make an effort for it. Um, it's really crazy too because I've gotten to the point I've turned into an old man. I'm about to turn 30 in a few days, and it's like, man, I don't even listen to like music in the truck anymore on my way to work. I just listen to silence. I'm just like, I want, like, there's no kids yelling. I'm good. I'm gonna enjoy it. But yeah, I mean, music's always been just such a big part of my life that it just always finds a way to happen.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's it's when music grips you that much, it's hard to let it go, and you always got to find an outlet for it somehow. Or you're gonna like explode, you know.
Yeah, and like, and the really cool thing is I listen to just a lot of diverse amounts of music. So it's really, I've got a lot of like a constant stream of new things I get to listen to. I mean, I listen to like rap, like old school 90s rap, atmosphere, people like that. And then I listen to Motown, I listen to old school R&B, I'm starting to get back into some of the like country stuff like Chris Stapleton, and it's pretty cool. And that's like one of the things when I have like new musicians, I'm like, don't pigeonhole yourself, don't sit there and just listen to one style of music, listen to everything, and that helps with like coming up with your own sound. So when I get to play, people, I can sound like anything I want, but when I get to play as like Jonathan doing Jonathan music, I get to come up with a really cool sound. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you will, talk about how you got into the podcasting and kind of what you've learned from it, what your experience has been.
yeah, so the podcast started the year that um I brought Cardboard Blake, or the seed was planted. So Chris and Marissa Carter, who are so the Effects Loop is Chris and Marissa Carter, Scott Hamilton, and myself. And Chris and Marissa had Carter's Talk Tone,
Mm-hmm.
which was kind of like demo work. They did some demo work. They did they were trying to get a podcast going. And I was in a shady motel room outside in Hermitage, Tennessee, outside of Nashville. And we went and we hung out there and we recorded an episode for Carter's Talk Tone. Scott wasn't there but Chris, Marissa, and I were Mark Swartz and Daniel Shields. And I feel like there was someone else there, and I can't remember. Um, but we all sat around and talked, and it was really cool. And Chris and Marissa and I became really good friends then, and Scott met us that year, and we all kind of like kept in touch. And then sometime towards the beginning of this year, um, we were talking about Carter's Talk Tone, and we're like, we should just reboot it and do this, and the effects loop happened. And we've got a really good group of personalities, and that's like one of the things I love about our show. And it's four friends just talking. You've got Marissa, who's like the mom. She like keeps us in line. She honestly doesn't talk much on the podcast, which is pretty funny. So every time that she talks, we're like, oh gosh, it's amazing. And then Chris is pretty knowledgeable on. Chris has a really good knowledge of like older guitar stuff, like kind of the history of things. And he takes care of a lot of our editing. He honestly like bankrolled the start of the podcast with like buying some of the stuff. Scott did too, and we all like pitched in to get it going finally. And Scott's the industry professional, so Scott does, I don't know, he's some sort of sound professor. He's told me what he does before, and I honestly forget. He's a sound engineer or something like that. Like not like the board, but like an acoustical engineer is I think what it's called. And he's got a lot of knowledge, and I'm honestly just kind of like the random personality. Like if we were Gilligan's Island, I'd be Gilligan.
He'd be the skipper.
Yes, yeah, Scott would be skipper. And Chris and Marissa, well, they're the Howls. They can be the Howls.
That's awesome.
If they listen, they'll probably listen to this, and like, I'll hear about it on next week's episode. But yeah, we all got together, and we're lucky we got ground running pretty well. The theme song, my brother let me use it. So we had a cool theme song starting out, and our audio quality theirs was pretty decent. Mine wasn't. I was still learning how to do things. But we figured it out really fast, and we got our format down really fast. We talked a lot about what's going on. So our slogan is keeping you in the loop of the guitar community. So we talk about a lot of the new stuff going on, and then we go on random tangents.
Well, you guys were out there on the NAMM floor, I know, really working hard. Putting together content and talking to different companies. And one of the things that I think was amazing is that you were able to come from the point of, you've been there several years. The other guys had been there a year or so before that, and you already had these connections, and so it was just a natural flow to go straight into that.
Yeah, and it was really funny because a lot of people remembered me. They're like, "Oh, you had the cardboard guy," and I was like, "Wow, that." Like, I thought it was kind of funny. I thought it was like one of those things where I thought it was funny and no one else would, but I guess a lot of people thought it was kind of cool and fun. And so we already had a lot of connections. A lot of them were through Chris too, Chris and Marissa, because they had Carter's Talk Tone, and they really did well at networking early. And we kind of like stemmed off of that. And then Scott had, connections in the the professional world, like professional audio stuff like that. We didn't cover a lot of it, but it was kind of cool. But we met a lot of really awesome companies that we got to talk to. Gibson was really good to us. We got to interview Gibson and do a walkthrough of their booth, and that's our biggest hit on YouTube right now, is the walkthrough interview I got to do with Eljon from Gibson. And then we went on the Gibson tour of the factory. We made that a priority, but we like hustled and bustled. We got so much content, and it was just really cool to be able to knock that out.
Yeah. I would have to say, like, Gibson is like, if you're gonna go to NAMM, that's got to be like one of the things, or at least Summer NAMM, it's got to be one of the places you hit, because if you're looking to help your channel, that's one of the biggest exposures, is to be able to tag, oh, this is about Gibson.
Especially with the controversy surrounding him right now.
Yeah.
So that I've kind of watched, and you see a spike whenever something happens with Gibson. Like they just recently fired their CEO, and we had we jumped up in views there for a minute. So I think we're like over 8,000 views on that video, which for us being a small podcast is pretty killer.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Um, and that's the thing is, I think and I, this is one podcaster talking to another, but like finding that place of, how do I add value to the community, and everybody has their niche, and everybody has something to offer.
Yeah, we really tried to make sure that we didn't stumble into there's in my world that I float in on the like guitar community, there's a few main podcasts. 60 Cycle Hum's one of the biggest ones, and we really didn't want to like copy their style. And then the Gear Slum is another big one where I run, and they've got their own dynamic. And we really just didn't want. We wanted to like find our own thing, and we didn't we don't cross. One of our things is we don't cross promote in other podcast groups, just because we wanted to like get on with our own merit.
Mm-hmm.
And every once in a while we might we'll be like, oh yeah, we mentioned that on our podcast, but we won't link it, stuff like that. But if it's Gear Talk and Gear Talk Praise and Worship, I'll spam the crud out of them.
Yeah, well, and I agree with you. Like, I learned that lesson a little bit the hard way, is that you don't necessarily need to cross promote in all the podcast groups, because I found that the show actually does better when it just stands up on its own 2 feet, and I kind of learned that the hard way. But yeah, you're totally right. Like, just let it stand up on its own merit, and if people dig it, they're gonna listen to it. And it's kind of hard as podcasters, I think, to like get the exposure that you would like to get sometimes.
There's a lot of there's some podcasts that are really competitive.
Yeah.
And I really don't care, man. You can listen to all of them. You don't listen to us if you don't want to. That's cool. Like I understand we're not going to be everyone's cup of tea. But we've got, we just do our thing and have fun. And we try to promote as much as we can without like crossing lines or anything. Like we'll joke around. We'll like make jokes about other podcasts, and like not about them, but like something that's relevant to them. Usually 60 Cycle Hum or maybe the Gear Slum, because we know that some of those guys listen to our stuff too. So the coolest thing as a podcast personality is, number one, when people like want to meet you. That happened at NAMM. It was really weird. Will Hugh, who's a listener of ours, he was like, yeah, I want to meet you guys, da-da-da. And I ran into him. He's like, oh, it's so cool. He's like, I love listening to the show. And I was like, really? There's actually a person listening to the show? That's blowing my mind.
Yeah, totally.
And then another cool thing happened when we went to Old Blood Noise Endeavors, and one of the guys was like, yeah, we were listening to an episode of your show. And I was like, holy crud, that's amazing. But it's one of those things too, like, and I also feel nerdy doing it, because like I'm at work and people are like, what do you do for fun? I'm like, on the podcast. I feel like I should be wearing glasses and pushing them up. That's what I do for fun. I sit around with 3 people and we just talk about guitars, and then other people download it and listen to us 4 talking about guitars.
Yeah. I think like one of those moments for me was going up and like talking to Grant Wilson at the Boutique Pedal Builders booth, and like I just thought he was like being really talkative and everything, like being nice, and I was like, surely this dude doesn't remember me from the year before, And then he was
gosh,
yeah, hey Clifton. And so it was like, right. Wow, like That's
Grant
nice to be remembered.
Grant Wilson is one of the most I've anytime I talk about him, I can't say enough good things. That
Oh, super
he
guy.
has a heart of gold, and he is by far one of the. So, like I said, I'm an introvert, and I actually suffer from anxiety, and sometimes I have anxiety attacks. Um, and when I was my first year going to Summer Nam, I went on public day, and that was it. And I was trying to do a million things at once, and I like had a anxiety attack. And Grant has autism, and so it's really cool because him and I kind of connected because I have ADD and stuff like that, and I'm on the spectrum a little bit. So it was really cool because I told him I was like, I'm kind of freaking out. And Karen, who's his partner, uh, who owns Big Ear as well, she was like, come hang out. Here's a quiet spot and everything. And man, he's got a heart of gold. He's one of
Yeah.
my favorite people in the guitar industry. And that's really cool too, is like I before I was in the podcast, I loved the guitar industry. I loved talking to builders. I was one of those people that like Robert Keeley's a rock star, you know, and all this. And it was really cool being able to join into that industry, um, and become a part of something that I loved seeing from the outside.
Yeah. That's the thing too, like for me, and is growing up and getting like the Musician's Friend and American Music Supply magazines, and every twice a year they would be pushing the NAM coverage, and
Mm-hmm.
it always was like seemed like this magical place you wanted to be as a musician, and it
Yeah, it's a grown man's Disney World.
yeah
Like you've just got all this cool stuff.
yeah, and it was like to actually like fall into this dimension where you get to go to these things and uh, have a podcast to be able to do that. That was just like for me, like the most like gratifying thing is wow, to be able to have that door open to be able to go like that. Never in my wildest dreams did I think I'd be able to be a part of the music community in that way, and I'm sure you feel the same way too.
Yeah, I never thought that I would be like able to, I wouldn't say influence, like being an influencer, but like I never thought that I'd be able to talk about this stuff and talk to these people. We've had some great guests on our show. Albert from Sinusoid,
Mm-hmm.
Doug Cower was on. That was really cool. And he just a builder that I'll never be able to own one of his guitars, or not anytime soon, because the they're just so phenomenal, and the quality is so amazing that they do earn their price point. I just know I wouldn't be able to own one anytime soon, but he was on there and he was talking with us, and he was talking about the stuff going on, and I've built a friendship with him. I can shoot him a message, stuff like that, and it's just really cool to see that happen. And like just being like treated like a legit personality or a legit podcast is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it
We had,
is.
we got our first sponsor. Well, we had two sponsors. One kind of happened right out of the gate. That was Lambertone Pickups, and then Stringjoy actually got sponsored us, and we like talked about it at NAM and kind of made it happen. So I mean that's really cool when stuff like that happens. We've been able to like, we didn't even pitch to them. It just kind of fell in our lap. We pitched to another company and that didn't happen. So that was kind of disheartening. But then Stringjoy came and they made that happen for us. And that was just really cool.
Yeah, and it's kind of one of those things where I know as a podcast, and I hope our listeners aren't dialing out now. Oh, I saw this insider podcast stuff, but I feel like the majority of our listeners are podcasters, anyways.
Yeah,
Um,
because we all
yeah,
just sit around and listen to each other all the
that's it.
time.
We just support each other. It's kind of like preachers. Like they want to sit around and hang out with their preacher buddies and
Mm-hmm.
go hear their friends preach. And I grew up in a pastor's home, and that's kind of attest that that's the way it is. So it's nothing different with podcasters. It's the same way.
Yeah, we're gonna go listen to Brother Billy. Get your clothes. Let's go.
Yes. That was half of my childhood right there.
Yep.
But
Susan, bring the check. Make sure you get the checkbook.
Yep. Totally. You know where I'm coming from.
I know exactly.
So yeah, it's kind of one of those things where even if you don't get the support or the sponsorships, it's kind of like you want to do it anyways, just because it's such a cool, community.
Yeah, and we always joke around on our show, and we're like, man, even if we didn't have any listeners, we'd still probably do a Google Hangout once a week, record it, and put it together just for fun.
Yeah. I know for me it started out as a joke. I don't know, for whatever reason at the time I was like trying to troll like Gear Slum, and I just fell into that, and then it became serious all of a sudden.
Well, like everyone was like they're like, oh, if you're in the inner circle for 60 Cycle Hum, you've got to make a podcast. And sure enough, like how many podcasts have jumped out? The Flippin' Flippers, are the Tone Jerks? Were they in that group or before?
I'm not sure. I've never been in the inner circle. I kind of came around a different way, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, but yeah, you did everyone started making the joke because 60 Cycle, because the Gear Slum started off as 60 Cycle Slum, and they were recording them talking about the 60 Cycle Hum episodes, and then they got their own thing going on, and they rebranded to the Gear Slum, and man, they've done great things though. They've got a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah. I was joking the other day. They said something about my podcast about how I tend to get everybody that they would want to interview. I end up beating them to it, and I responded, yes, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to one up you guys because I'm jealous of you.
Don't worry, they probably don't want me on their show, so this one's not an issue. I always joke around that Cole and Aaron hate me. I'm not sure how Phil feels about me, but we actually had a group chat going with a bunch of the podcasters, and Aaron's like, I don't hate you. He's just like, I just hate everyone.
Yeah.
I was like, okay.
Well, there is a Facebook group out there that
yeah, we're in it.
about I forgot what the title is. It's something about
people Aaron and Bubo don't like.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. It's people Aaron and Bubo don't like. I was like, oh my gosh. And I think there's 12 of us in there. I get added to random groups, and it's just I turn around, I'm like, what is this? Someone just posted in the stew group. I'm in a group about stew.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw one about that yesterday, but unfortunately I can't troll anymore in those groups because my bluff is gone.
I think we talked about that at NAMM. I think it was me and you. If it wasn't, then it was someone else, and they're not getting credit. You can take it. But we talked about when you get a podcast, now you are representing a brand. I think the Clifton Worley show is Clifton Worley, and you can't go just be a jerk in groups and troll.
Mm-mm.
And man, I don't know how many times I've talked to Scott from my podcast, and he's just like, bruh, don't do it. Well, he didn't say bruh. He doesn't say bruh, I don't think. He's from Chicago, so he's like, dude, don't do it.
Yeah. It's one of those things. It's I guess it grows you up a little bit, and you have to be responsible with it if you really want it to go anywhere. Yeah. It's cut all the. It's kind of like Jim on The Office, how he had to grow up.
Yeah, we all had to get our hair cut.
Yeah. Yep. Yes, indeed. Well.
So, I mean, but it's it's definitely. But I still get to have fun because my personality. I don't really change much for the show. So I goof off on the show and get distracted. And I get to do that on Facebook.
But it sounds like you guys are very patriotic because you're always saying "God bless America."
God bless. That's my. So I'm a good Southern Christian boy, and I don't take the Lord's name in vain. So I do the like you see the videos of like Southern cussing, like that's totally me. I'm like, gosh darn it, and like God bless America, and uh, I do all those things. Like I try not to cuss as much as possible. So I do the fake words, which if you were raised in Assemblies of God in the 90s, that's just as bad as
Well,
cussing.
that's the way I grew up, so yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I think that's a Southern Baptist thing too. Aren't like is like the it's the same thing. Your heart,
Yeah.
God knows what's in your heart, and I'm just like, listen, if God knows what's in my heart, the saying that is not the worst thing that's gonna happen right now.
Yeah.
Like, like thank God that God's a fair and just, I'm thankful he's a fair and just God. So he knows. It's all good. Like,
Yeah.
don't worry.
Yeah.
So
No, this is definitely a southern thing, and if you're not from the South, maybe just take all that and disregard it.
yeah, like you like I watch like videos of like I like to watch a lot of stand-up comedy too, and you watch like British comedians and they're like using all this filth, and they're just like that's just how they talk. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Like, we're not allowed to say those words over here. That's like you see like pastors from like England and stuff like that. They're like drinking a beer and doing all that. And I was raised in the South. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I like, I mean, I enjoy a drink every once in a while, but like, man, that's like one of those things. Like, I'm still in the South. Like, if someone drinks at church, either everyone knows about it or they're keeping a really good secret.
Yeah.
Did you hear about Bobby over there? He had 2 Heinekens last night.
Yeah, I know out on the West Coast, I think it's like cigarettes is the thing that like they frown on you on. In California, it's like it's
And
not
straws.
alcohol. Yeah.
Straws and littering, man. It's the you can have 15 shots of whiskey, but you better not throw that cigarette butt on the ground.
Yeah. And then I think like they say like North Carolina is like so anti-alcohol, but everybody smokes cigarettes over there.
Yeah, I can't say anything. I smoke and drink, so like I'm just I'm just you know not that great of a person apparently, but they still let me play at church, so that works out.
That's well. So let's talk a little bit about that before we close out. You play at church. Uh, has it kept you like sharp? You think as a musician?
Yeah, so the cool thing, I think it's kept me sharp because right now, so we used to have our worship leader or our pastor led worship because he was a worship leader at the church that we kind of branched off from, and he uh he was leading worship, and like I said, he was more Southern gospel and stuff like that, and now his sons are leading worship. So we're going from one generation to another with musical styles, and that's been really cool because I've worked with Jansen. He is the one who's pretty much controls the music. Bryson, he was a drummer, and now he sings lead most of the time. Um, but Jansen is a keyboard and bass player. He plays guitar as well. He's a multi instrumentalist, and it's been really cool because I ask him, I'm like, what are we, what style are we going for? And it's all this new young stuff, and people want to say what oh, it's just one note and 15 delays and stuff like that, and it's a different style that I've really enjoyed learning and trying to sound like that. But playing in church really keeps you sharp, especially if you play in churches that just do different styles quite a bit. I mean, I've played with different worship leaders. I've gotten to play at different churches, and everyone's style is so different. You can have 3 different worship leaders do the same song, and they'll all be different styles.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really cool. I think that's been one of the neatest things is, and that keeps you sharp. That keeps you where you've got to stay with it. And we're moving in the world of multi-tracks and and click and all this stuff, and it brings your musicianship up because you've got to stay in time. You've got to do all this. There's no dragging, you've got to know your parts. So that's another cool thing, because you got a lot of the players. I used to be one of the ones where I'm like, well, I'm just going to make up everything. And if you look at classically trained and a just top-notch musician, they read their parts, they read what's on the music, and they play it the way it's written. So I've really like switched my viewpoint on some things whenever we move to this style and doing click tracks and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. I know. One of the things that I found, like the few times I've gotten to play to tracks, is it helps a lot when you're prepping like to play with a group you never played before, because
Hmm.
like they're essentially, you just got to listen to this and rehearse it just like this, and like that's the way the band's got to play. And so it's easy, like when you're doing pickup bands and moving between different groups, because it just brings it like so much more consistent together so fast,
Hmm.
instead of, oh, we probably need to get together and jam for 3 hours before we play together.
Yeah, Scott, he plays at a church that uses tracks and cues, and that's one of the things that he's talked about. Is he's like, everyone has to know their parts,
Hmm.
like, and that brings you to a new level. You've got to know your stuff. um and that keeps you sharp, and finding a new style that you've never played before and learning that. I remember whenever I wanted to learn how to do chicken picking, um and that was tough. That's a style that I'm still trying to do well.
Yeah, that's a very tough style. I think the like one of the best resources I found for this, and I'm blanking on the guy's name, but if you look up on YouTube, he's got this series called Still This Lick,
Yeah.
and he like really delves into like teaching you how to play some of the like the Brad Paisley type stuff.
Hmm. Yeah, man, and I miss the old school, like Ultimate Guitar, or not Ultimate Guitar, but like Guitar World magazines. They used to have
Mm-hmm.
the tabs,
Mm-hmm.
and that was like, or like you can't play this. There was the like crazy licks. That was pretty cool too.
Yeah, yeah. It I remember kind of that being the norm, and now it's like, uh, let's find a YouTube channel where they, have like the video on the fingerboard, and you're supposed to kind of just copy that, which is helpful too.
Yeah, well, and with the internet and so many resources online, there's almost no excuse anymore for
Mm-mm.
guitar players to not play a certain style, or to pigeonhole themselves. That's one of the things that blows my mind. Is you've got these people who are like, I only play this, and it's like, why? Why do you want to like, just like put on blinders and only play a small, narrow sliver of what you could play?
Yeah, yeah, totally. I think music is too like fluid, and like styles are too fluid between each other, that you can just like play one thing and not
Yeah, I
not
mean,
have to learn the other stuff. You expect to
well,
play with people.
all right, so the everything trickles down. So one of my most controversial viewpoints was, at one point, I thought Jimi Hendrix was overrated. Um, and I was young and really didn't know any better. But I was just like, Jimi Hendrix is overrated. I thought he's a sloppy guitar player live. And wanting to be a session musician, I felt like I wanted to play it right. I didn't want to be sloppy. I didn't want to hit wrong notes. And you've got Jimi Hendrix, who was just sloppy. I mean, he was on drugs, so that didn't help. But what was it? How many times did it take? How many takes did it take for him to do All Along the Watchtower? His only, you know, number one hit. Um, and it was a cover.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was my argument. But then I saw the trickle down of like the guitar players I like listening to, who were like, yeah, Jimi Hendrix was an influence. Jimi Hendrix was an influence. And so in some of my playing, there's Jimi Hendrix influence. Like, I love John Mayer, and he's a big Jimi Hendrix fan. Stevie Ray Vaughan, huge Jimi Hendrix fan. You got all these guys who are huge fans and were influenced by him, and that goes with the music styles too. It all trickles down, um some of my early people I love listening to, Jerry Lee Lewis. I love Jerry Lee Lewis. He Great Balls of Fire.
Hmm.
um all these other songs that he did, you know and that was stolen pretty much from black R&B at the time.
Yeah.
Whole lot of shaking going on was that wasn't even his original song by him, and that was his like first really big hit. um and you just see that everything kind of flows in together. A band that I love, Nine Inch Nails, you listen to some of their tracks and you hear kind of a bluesy influence. You hear all this different stuff going on. There's songs that he has that are classically influenced, and then he's influenced a bunch of people. And to sit there and like say you don't like a style of music, I don't think you're giving it a fair shot.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's something I couldn't agree more. It's like I was telling somebody the other day. It's like my grandfather really was a huge Southern gospel fan, and I could never get into his music. And he was always like trying to drop a little nugget here. Hey, this is something I enjoy, and trying to get like his grandkids into his style of music. And there never was a huge buy-in. But now, like as an adult, like I can go listen to a song now that like was important to him, and like I see the merit in it now. Like I get it.
There was there's a song that my stepfather used to listen to all the time. He had this tape that was stayed in his van, and it had the Ventures, the Shadows, but a song that was on there that I used to like kind of think was funny. It's become one of my favorite songs of all time, and that's "Wonderful Time Up There" by Pat Boone. If you haven't listened to this song, you'll listen to it. My pastor makes fun of me because I absolutely love this song, and it's just a good song. And if you don't try things, you'll never really expand yourself. And that's one thing I feel like as a musician, if I could ever impart something and like shake someone's head and be like, you have to understand this, it's that you cannot pigeonhole yourself as a musician. You can't do it. It's not healthy as a musician, in my opinion. And you just got to try new things and do different styles and get outside of your comfort zone.
Yeah, totally. And that's why, like, I find myself, like, recently, like, listening and trying to at least figure out what's going on with pop music, like, today.
Man, there's, what? I love, Justin Bieber has a song that's just him, an electric guitar, a clean electric guitar, and a trumpet.
Yeah.
I forgot what
yeah, I forgot the name of it too, but it's great production.
Love Yourself. That's what it is. It's a phenomenal song. My kids make fun of me because I'm almost 30 years old and I'm riding around my truck listening to Justin Bieber. But if you close your mind off to it, you'll never understand like what you're missing out on. CeeLo Green is another artist that has just really cool musicians playing. I love what's his name? Bruno Mars. That's another one.
Yeah.
That's modern R&B. Justin Timberlake always has excellent musical tracks. And if you look at the heyday of rock and roll, like when the Wrecking Crew was recording all this stuff, that's another thing that they talked about. I watched the documentary on Netflix, or I forgot what it was, on Hulu or Amazon Prime. And they talk about being versatile players. They would record for one artist one day, one artist the next day, one artist the other, and it was all different stuff. I mean, they recorded so many different TV show themes, and they're the people that people kept coming back for. And if you want to be wanted as a musician, if not every musician's meant to start their own band, and go out and make it big and just play mediocre. Not everyone's going to be kind of Nirvana. Like Kurt Cobain was a mediocre guitar player for the most part, and not everyone's going to be that. But everyone has the potential of being a musician that people want to play with.
Yeah, yeah.
You
That's
you don't
a
want to
good
be
point.
the musician where everyone's like, "Oh gosh, he's coming." You want to be the musician that everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, Clifton's coming. Awesome." Like they know it's taken care of.
Yeah, yeah. I couldn't agree more. Like, I think I maybe in the past, especially in my teenage years, was very like picky. Like, oh, if this person doesn't play this style of music, I don't want to play with them. Kind of being snobby, and I
Hmm.
missed out on a lot of musical opportunities because I had a closed mind.
Yeah, um I've played in punk bands, ska bands, I've played in cover bands, I've done rock bands. I've done if someone's asked me to play, I almost have never I don't know of a time I've really said no. I'll try it. I'll see what happens. Who knows what's going to happen? Um you might find something that's just absolutely like you found your calling, and you never know what that can be. Um a lot of hired gun musicians, touring musicians. I mean, Pino Palladino's a bass player that has played with The Who, with Nine Inch Nails, with John Mayer, all these different acts. Pino's the guy you get.
Hmm.
And, that's one thing that I feel like more musicians need to strive for. Don't always try to be the rock star. Be an excellent musician first.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just be the kind of musician I think that you'd want in your band,
Hmm.
and put in the work. That's something like I always try to push myself because it's easy like when you're doing the same thing every week to kind of not get stretched. But like
Hmm.
if I have an opportunity to play with somebody new, like I always try to put in the kind of effort that I wish like somebody I was playing with would do. And show up and
Yeah.
know the songs inside and out, and be able to play the parts.
Yeah. I always think about what I dread walking into, and I make sure I'm not that.
Yeah, don't be a
I try,
liability. Yeah, that's
yeah,
it. That's it.
I don't want to be the person that people dread playing with, and I don't want to be the guy that, you're the reason why we have to keep stopping because you keep missing a part or you keep doing something wrong. I and we when I'm playing at churches, one of the main things I always ask, I'm like, what do you want from me in this song? Serve the song. One of the best compliments I ever got, and it's it was from my pastor's wife back whenever they were worship leaders. They're both phenomenal singers. My pastor, well, she's my pastor as well. She's not a pastor's wife, but we call her Mama Sherry, and she's got pipes of an angel. But she came up to me and she goes, it was after about 3 or 4 weeks of playing, and she said, you know, I'm really glad you're here because Jeff has needed a guitar player who can play for the song.
Mm-hmm.
And man, that like hit me in the gut. I was like, that was like one of the best compliments I ever got. Is someone telling me that they could tell I was playing for the song. I wasn't noodling the whole time. I was playing what needed to be played.
Yeah, yeah, and that's all you can ask for really in a guitarist.
Yeah. I mean, you don't need the 20-minute guitar solos, even though those are a lot of fun.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But I think that era has passed us by as guitar players,
Hmm.
where we're like the showcase.
Yeah. I mean, and there's so much that we can do with guitar nowadays with pedals and effects. One of the things I love doing is we don't have a synth player. And so sometimes when we're doing like a really cool part, like I cock my wah and I get in that weird filter section
Mm-hmm.
and I do kind of a synth sound with my guitar. And it's like, I'm not trying to sound like a guitar player at that point. I'm trying to play what sounds really cool in the song.
Yeah, yeah.
And wah pedals are fun, so.
Well, coming in here to a close, is there anything else you would like to add?
No, not really. I mean, it's if you know, one of the things that I always like to impart is be humble and do what's needed of you. as a musician. So you just see a lot of cocky musicians, and man, that just irks me sometimes. But it's good to be confident in your playing, but staying humble and just playing for the song is one of the best things you can do as a musician.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for so much for coming on and hanging out with me on the show tonight. And
Yeah.
I just want to encourage, if you listen to this show but have not checked out the Effects Loop, go check it out. I think you'll love it. They're really super chill dudes,
And Dudette. Don't forget the Dudette.
that's it. And Marissa.
And we got Marissa.
Yeah.
So,
Which is
so we've
cool.
got that thing.
Yeah. It's a mix. It's not just for guys. It's for men and women, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, not maybe not for children. We're not as clean cut as Clifton is.
Yeah, you can't throw this on in the van going down the road with your kids.
No, no. We were recording this last episode, and it was funny because Chris said the F word, and Chris really doesn't cuss on the podcast, and we were all just like kind of like, what just happened? But yeah, no, like check us out. We're on Instagram. We're everywhere, just like Clifton is. But keep supporting Clifton. Like, one of the cool things about the group of podcasts that we run in is we're all very supportive of each other. So, but Clifton, you should come on our show one time.
I would love to do that. Just hit me up and I will do that anytime.
Yeah, because we got to go on your show, so it's your turn to come on our show.
Yeah, it sounds like a fun time. Well, thank you again, and we'll talk later.
All right, see you guys.